Hi, my name is Carolee Conqueror. I'm an Associate Director of Admissions in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions at George Washington University. And today we're going over the 10 things you need to know about the college application. Schools will primarily ask you for test scores if they do require them for admission. And those test scores will generally be the SAT or the ACT scores. You can find this information on various admissions websites. Ours is under the Apply tab within our application section of our website, and you'll be able to see a range of policies that GW has, and then you'll also be able to explore that with other colleges and universities that you're looking for. Now, there are various test score policies, and those policies could include test submitting, which is the SAT or ACT score. SAT and ACT scores also can be super scored, which means that your highest test taking period will be put together to come up with your highest combination. So if you sat for the SAT and did really well in the math section one time and not so great the second time, your highest math score will be combined with your highest evidence-based reading score. Many schools will also super score the ACT, and that's another area where you can get the highest advantage with your highest composite score. These are all questions that you'll definitely want to be asking schools that you're looking for. Other test policies will include test optional, which means that you have the option to submit scores or not submit scores. You do want to ask the questions, so what else do I need to submit in lieu of test scores if that is in fact a requirement? Some schools may say that they want to see a piece of writing. They may ask you for SAT exam scores. Some schools won't ask you for anything. They just ask you to answer a question. Yes, I plan to submit scores. No, I do not. And then you also want to ask, as far as for those test optional schools, if I want to be considered for a scholarship, are test scores required, or do I have to apply by a certain deadline? That's also another question that you'll want to ask certain schools. I will say at George Washington, we do not ask you to submit scores by a certain deadline. You can be test optional for all of our programs and be considered for merit scholarships with or without test scores. Now, there are also some schools that will be using a test blind policy. And test blind means that they're not going to look at your scores whether you send them to them or not. So that's something to consider. Even if you would arrange to have the scores sent to the school back when you took the sat for the tests, then the scores will be there, but they will not be reviewing those scores. So those are the three test policies. You've got test submitting, test optional. There's test flexible, which means that they don't care if you do SAT or ACT, and then you have test blind. So let's talk a little bit about letters of recommendation, and they're a very important part of the application process. You have often you're going to be asked for at least one recommendation from your counselor, and you'll also be asked for at least one teacher recommendation, but there could be more along the way. The counselor recommendation is what I would call more the spotlight view of who you are as a student in your school. The counselor has known you throughout your time as a high school student. They're able to see your growth as a student. They're able to see your growth as a community member. So that counselor letter is going to give us a good overview. Sometimes the counselor will also mention things that you're involved in that you may not have included in your activity list. They were impressed by it. Maybe you thought it wasn't as important. So the counselor letter gives us a big overview. The teacher recommendation is going to be more like the spotlight. They're going to tell us a little bit more about who you are in the day-to-day. Now, it's very important that you look at all the schools that you're considering to make sure that what you're submitting is what they need. For instance, at GW, one counselor, one teacher recommendation. But there's going to be another school that you may be applying to that doesn't want any of those. And I can honestly tell you we never need 15. So make sure that you're following the requirements for each of the schools that you're applying to. The counselor recommendation, again, is super important because of the fact that it gives you a really good broad overview of your experience as a student at that school. Your counselor will also speak to some attributes that you may not even have thought about. Like you may have been a little bit less braggy in your activities, but your counselor may talk about really what you did and how you made a big difference. There's also the opportunity that they may talk about a circumstance that you have not shared with us that may have impacted your performance in a class. And it may be something that's related to something that happened at school or something in your life. So they give us as admissions officers the perspective of what happened as you are a student at that particular school. Now, when you are choosing that teacher recommendation, you have a lot of choices. You could always go for that teacher that gave you the best grade. Obviously, you enjoyed that subject. You did really, really well in that class. Again, the teacher is going to be able to tell us who you were in that classroom and what kind of student that you will be when you enter college. You could also ask that teacher where maybe you struggled for that grade, but at the end, you really became an incredible student who learned a lot, but maybe you only got a B in that class. But you have shown that you have tenacity, you worked through any issues you were having, and you may have taken the time to meet with that teacher one-on-one. Those are attributes that are really important to colleges when we're looking at you as a future college student. We want to know that you're able to take charge of your education, and so a lot of times your teacher recommendation will help support what we're seeing in other areas of your application. You can choose another person. Not every school will allow this optional coach. It could be somebody from your church, somebody in your community. If you happen to be a homeschooled student and your family is your primary educator, whether that's your parent or another relative, that person can act as your recommender. But that extra person generally should not be your brother, your sister, your mother if you don't go to a homeschooling situation. Now, the recommendation coming from an outside source, there may be an opportunity for you to submit it through your application. It may be something that you're going to submit later on after your application's been received, and you will send it to the admissions office in general, like the general admissions office email address. I will say, and I often tell students when they ask, can I submit an extra letter? I always say to them, what else do you think that person will talk to us about that isn't in the other elements of your application? You want to make sure that they are talking about an attribute that you feel needs to be highlighted. So you want to include that extra letter if you feel that that's super important to you. Now, we do look at your extracurricular involvement. This is because there's a lot of things going on college campuses. Our college is very busy. Our students are very active. They're active in their academics. They're active through their student organizations. They're doing internships. They're holding jobs. Your activities actually give us an insight to your time management skills. It's also your gifts and talents that you will bring with you when you come to be a college student on our campuses. So this is, again, a place where you want to definitely brag. You want to talk about the things that you're involved in, but you also want to give us not only the what, but you want to give us the why. So make sure that you include that small sentence, it's like a small little tweet that you can write and tell us a little bit about the activities that you're involved in, especially if you've done leadership roles, maybe started an organization at your school, or perhaps you have also gone outside of your community. Maybe you have been doing babysitting down the street, and this is what you've been doing all your life, or you're cutting the lawn of your neighbor. These are all attributes that talk about you as a community member. Don't forget about your part-time jobs. Part-time jobs are just as valuable as those activities that you do as being a high school student and those activities that you're involved in. So if you have a 10-hour or 20-hour a week part-time job, that's a big deal. You want to mention that. Also, if you're helping out at home, taking care of family members because your parents are working, you want to include all those activities. Again, it gives us a full view of who you are as a student, and we're very interested in what you're doing outside the classroom. Now, again, you want to prioritize that activities on that application. That means that you want to put your favorite things or the things that you're involved with mostly at the very top. You do not necessarily need to build that list chronologically. You want to highlight your most important things and then move down the list. Do you need to go as far back as 9th grade? Maybe, maybe not. Sometimes just even 10th and 11th and 12th grade is all we need. We want to see that you're involved. We don't necessarily need to see that you've been involved all 4 years, but if you're an athlete and you've been involved all 4 years, or you've been involved in a club and you've risen through that club and you've become the president or vice president of that organization, you definitely want to list that as well. So we are also going to be looking at your transcript. And your transcript is going to tell us a lot about what you're involved in, but it's also many times we're going to look at that transcript to identify courses that you've been taking that relate to the intended majors that you've indicated on your application. Naturally, if you're looking at the sciences, we're going to be looking for students' strength in biology and chemistry. If they took physics, if they've done computer science, we're going to be looking for those courses. If you're involved in the arts and you want to major in the arts, we're going to be looking for those art classes that you took while you were in high school. If you are a student who is the humanities student, you might have more social sciences, you might have more Englishes, and again, those student maybe who's looking at international affairs, who may be looking for a good amount of history with working in world languages. These are all parts of the application, but we're also going to be looking at your rigor, the strength of that application, how hard you've worked in those challenging classes, and we want to make sure that you're a successful student at our campuses, so we're going to be looking through that transcript to look for that growing grade trend. And again, we understand that sometimes life isn't perfect and you may not do well in all of your classes. We want to make sure that you don't get too stressed out about that. We're looking at the big picture here. We understand that sometimes some students just adjusting to 9th grade is challenging enough. Even 10th grade can be the most challenging year because you've ramped up the rigor in your classes. We also know that the pandemic has impacted things for many students too. So you want to make sure that you don't get too worked up about your grades. We definitely want to see a growing trend. That's where maybe that letter recommendation from that teacher that can talk about that grade that might be out of character with other classes that you've succeeded in throughout high school. Again, don't get too worked up about the overall. We're looking at the big picture. So I know this is a lot of information at once, and we often find that whenever we're doing presentations about the application process, it can be very overwhelming. There's a lot of moving parts, and this might be the first time in your life where you're being examined by many people and you don't have an idea of what we're thinking about. Please ask us questions. We're here for you. You can contact our office right here, our phone number, and you can see our email address. We're able to help you in any way. We also have all of our admissions team members all have assigned territories. You can contact us on our website, and you'll be able to talk to somebody who knows where you're from, your school, and they'll be able to help you through this process. Thanks so much for coming today and listening about our admissions programs at GW.